Welcome to everybody. Everybody can hear me okay? Can I get a nod just to make sure? Thank you. I'm Lindsay Myers. I'm the Director of Development at Jaywood Platt. So I want to welcome everybody. Welcome to our panelists, our moderator, our scholars who will continue to join us. Thanks. It's great to see everybody here tonight. A little bit of housekeeping. Scholars on the call, if you can keep your mics and your video off for this. And if you have questions, why don't you use the chat feature and you can just send them to me. And then if we have time at the end of this, we will cover. And feel free to ask questions on anything having to do with the Empower program, Jaywood Platt, or obviously information that our panelists cover. So I'm going to start, we're going to do introductions in just a few minutes. I just wanted to welcome again our panelists and moderator, Mark. And before we get started, I just wanted to talk for just a few minutes about the Empower program. Hopefully all of our scholars on the call are familiar with the program, but if not, I'm just going to give a real brief, quick overview, and forgive me if I just kind of peek over at my notes here because I don't want to leave anything out. So as hopefully everyone knows, we started the Empower program at Jaywood Platt in 2020. And in broad strokes, we started this program for really two main reasons. First reason being, we knew that we had tremendous resources in the GAP and Jaywood Platt networks. Resources and people that we knew wanted to give back to our scholars and people that wanted to help. And then second of all, we knew that our scholars have shown to be highly capable with exceptional potential. So, you know, in a big picture, we thought if we could take these great resources in our networks and connect them with our scholars, who we believe to be, again, very exceptional, we thought that the result would be very powerful. And it's turning out to be pretty powerful since 2020. So there you have it in a nutshell, why we created the Empower program, really to connect our scholars with the great resources that we have. And we think it's a good investment, knowing how awesome our kids are. Empower program has four main components. I'm just going to touch on them really quickly. First component, and you'll see this through the webinar tonight, is we've established partnerships with corporate partners. Why do we do this? For a variety of reasons. Corporate partners can help with our webinars, provide us with resources. We do this in a very literal way to connect our scholars with jobs and internships. We recently started a job board at the Trust, and we want our scholars to be on the front lines of upcoming internship opportunities. So these corporate partnerships provide us with vast resources that we can then pass on to our scholars. So that's the first part of the Empower program, probably the most important part of the program. We employ U-Science, career aptitude software. Many of our scholars have already availed themselves of this resource. U-Science is terrific, and let me know if you have questions about that. Webinar series, obviously, this is our second webinar. We try to host 3 or 4 of these a year and value your feedback from scholars and participants as we work to kind of make these better. And then the last pillar of the Empower program, and one that we're super excited about, is our mentoring platform. Many of our scholars have already participated in this mentoring platform. We encourage, my hope is that all of our scholars will avail themselves of this mentor relationship and this platform that we've provided. Before we get started, I will just say to anybody on the call and to all of our scholars, if you are on the fence about participating in the mentor program, really listen to our panelists tonight with an ear for how important mentorship has been to them and what they've gotten out of the mentor experiences that they've had in their own lives. I think it will help you realize the importance that this kind of mentoring can have. And then, you know, before I introduce Mark, I just want to say to our scholars, you know, in his bio, it will become clear that, you know, Mark is an executive leadership coach. But why is this important? It's important because Mark provides coaching to very accomplished professionals who are very advanced in their field. And we think at Platt that this is important because what it shows is that at all points, people are continuing to evolve, to learn, to try and better themselves. All of those things that we're asking you to do, highly accomplished professionals are still doing that. So we hope that that message comes through loud and clear too. You know, at no point does anybody have everything figured out. So if you're a scholar on this call and you're intimidated by professionals on the panel, professionals who want to mentor you, please don't. These are people that want to help the panel and our mentors, people that care about youth development and about helping you. So we hope that that comes through loud and clear. And it is my pleasure now. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, but first I'm going to read Mark's bio. And I'm reading this, I apologize, because I can't possibly remember all of the accomplishments. So bear with me, please. Mark Vegh is a communications and leadership development specialist. For the past 20 years, he's worked internationally with top-tier clients across all industry sectors, from Fortune 100 companies to startups. He helps leaders and executives build great leadership brands by maximizing their impact in communication skills, executive presence, people leadership, and engagement, and helps them to be the best and most impactful leaders they can be. Mark also prepares key executives for events, public speaking, investor conferences, and new business pitches. And he has extensive experience in preparing senior executives of PE-backed businesses for successful sales meetings. Mark has worked with some of the world's leading companies, including Exelon, Shell, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, KKR, HSBC, and the BBC, Bank of England, Abbott, and many other top-tier clients around the world. This is significant in the connections, again, that this panel can provide to you scholars who are listening. As part of their work at GGI, Mark works with the United Nations GCI, which is the Junior Chamber International, and for many years, he's helped develop young leaders around the world. Mark lives in London, and when he is not working, he enjoys spending time with his family and friends. His many interests include food and wine, theater, music, visual arts, yoga, and running, travel, and watching his favorite soccer team, Tottenham Hotspur. And I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. I didn't have many options with the pronunciation. So thanks for bearing with me as I read my notes. I'm now going to turn it over to Mark, who will be much more interesting than I am. So welcome, Mark. And I think you're muted.
Hello, is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and absolute pleasure to be here. I was involved last year with the webinar, and I think we had a brilliant session. And I honestly think, we've got a fantastic panel here this evening who I'm sure are going to share some brilliant advice with all of us tonight. It's a really good point, Lindsay, you make about learning, actually, because I do work with execs, at all levels. And it is remarkable how some of the very best people I've worked with are people who are committed to that lifelong learning. They never stop learning. They're always looking to develop. So I think that's a theme that we're going to pick up on this evening. And I think we've got some great themes to discuss. And as I said, a really great panel. So I'd like to introduce the panel first of all to you. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Julie Gieser. Hello, Julie. Hi. So Julie is the Principal Accounting Officer for Pepco Holdings, which is comprised of 3 of the public utility companies owned by Exelon, which I'm sure, as you know, is a Fortune 100 company. And Julie leads a team of approximately 50 accounting professionals, and she's responsible for overseeing the accounting and financial reporting functions for Pepco, Delmarva Power and Light, and Atlantic City Electric. She's been with Exelon for 11 years, and in that time, she's held several leadership positions across the company. And before that, she spent 8 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers. In terms of personal life, Julie lives in the suburbs of Baltimore with her family, and she also serves on the board of directors for the Maryland Coalition of Families. And that's an organization that connects families across the state with resources and services to assist with mental health and substance abuse. So welcome, Julie. I'd like to introduce Les Haggett now. Les serves as first vice president of CBRE, and they're the #1 global commercial real estate firm. Les there, he helps to lead the advisory and transaction services group, which represents companies with their commercial real estate needs in the Philadelphia region. Les graduated from Brown University in 2005 with a BA in business economics, and he is actually a former hockey player. And he played 2 years of professional hockey in, I'll get this right, the AHL and the ECHL. And he actually captained the 04 and 05 Brown University men's ice hockey team. So huge involvement in sport. And I think sport is one of the themes that we're going to discuss this evening. And in terms of what kind of lessons can we learn from sport and that take into our professional lives and leadership. Les also does an enormous amount of charitable work, and this includes the chair of the Friends of the Snyder Hockey Leadership Committee. He's a board member at CBRE Cares, and also chair of the annual fundraising committee for Caring People Alliance. He lives in Berwyn, PA, with his wife, son, and 2 dogs, and he enjoys coaching his son's hockey and baseball teams. I'd like to introduce Dana Small now, and Dana is the Director of Regional Electric Operations for Delmarva Power, which, as I'm sure you know, is an electric and gas utility which serves Delaware and the rest of the Delaware and the Delmarva, Peninsula, and is responsible for the day-to-day electric operations of the region. And I understand that Dana, believe, is the first woman to hold that position, which is a remarkable feat in such a male-dominated world. Delmarva is obviously part of the Exelon group of companies. So Dana's been working in the sector for 18 years, so hugely experienced. And she has held a number of key leadership roles, including at Pepco, where she was a director. Dana has a bachelor's degree in environmental soil science from the University of Delaware, and she was also a scholar athlete there. In terms of involvement in external associations and committees, Dana was the chair of the Edison Electric Institute's Siting Committee, and also throughout her career, she's engaged with numerous environmental organizations, helping them create programs and projects to advance the protection of natural resources and wildlife. And now, Nick Francani. Good evening, Nick. Nick is Managing Director of Siegfried's Philadelphia Metro Market, where he serves as a leadership advisor to financial executives, helping them transform themselves into better leaders. So again, I think there's that lifelong learning theme here. In terms of the business, Nick and Siegfried, they provide their clients with high caliber accounting professionals to support their key accounting and finance initiatives. Nick has been at Siegfried for 17 years, and before that, he was a senior auditor at EY Philadelphia. He has a Bachelor of Accountancy degree from Villanova University, and he's actually a member of the Villanova School of Business Accounting Department Advisory Council. And he does a lot of mentoring there, and we're going to hear some great examples from Nick about his experience of mentoring at Villanova. He lives in Chadds Pennsylvania with his family. He's passionate about the game of golf and Villanova basketball. And Nick also serves as a development committee member for the Jaywood Platt Caddy Scholarship Trust. So last but by no means least, Buddy Aiken. Good evening, Buddy. Buddy is controller of Exelon Utilities, and that's a position that he has held since September 2019. And he's responsible there for leading the accounting and financial reporting for all the regulated utilities within Exelon Corporation. And that's 5 different companies. Buddy's had a long career with Exelon, going right back to 2007. And he's held a variety of senior roles within the company since then. Prior to that, Buddy was a director at Ernst & Young based in London. That's where I first met him. And throughout his career, Buddy has held a variety of financial management positions, both in the UK and in the US. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Administration from Muhlenberg College, and he's a certified public accountant in the state of Pennsylvania. Buddy's also involved in a number of great initiatives and programs outside of his day job. He's a trustee for the Jaywood Platt Foundation. He's a board member of the Ed Snyder Youth Hockey Foundation in Philadelphia, and board member and current chairman, actually, at the St. David's Golf Club in Wayne, Pennsylvania. And finally, together with his wife, Buddy actively supports the youth hockey development programs at Iceline in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So I'm sure you'll agree, quite an experienced and hugely knowledgeable panel that we're going to hear from. And I'm looking forward to hearing and discussing some of their great advice. So I'd like to kick off this evening and talk about sport. And when we were discussing the other day, one of the topics that came up, and I thought it was really interesting, a lot of the panel members have a great involvement in sport. And we were talking about the lessons that people have learnt from sport that they've taken into their professional careers and in fact into leadership. And I'd like to invite Dana to just share an experience that she had in terms of being a scholar athlete and also some of the great lessons you learned there, Dana. Can I hand over to you?
Sure. So I was thinking about this, and I think it comes down to kind of where sports and leadership cross over. And I think what athletics taught me is grit. And what I mean by that is when you think about like the greatest sports moments, it's Nick Foles and, trick plays to win the Super Bowl. It's, fourth down, what's going to happen? It's the bottom of the ninth, 2 strikes, bases loaded. Those great moments are like character defining moments. And when you go from being an athlete at a pretty high level and you go into a career and you start to build a career, that competitiveness doesn't go away. That grit, that sense of stamina, the fact that you're not gonna give up when you're or kind of rest on your laurels when you're close to the finish line. I think all of those are conscious and unconscious leadership skills that we grow and cultivate and create and take from our careers as athletes. I think when you're faced with big decisions, I think when you're faced with complex solution or problems and you're looking for complex solutions, we call on that competitiveness that we've honed and we've kind of experienced, whether it's at college and athletics in Division I or wherever you kind of top out your athletic career. All of those are really character defining and character building situations. I shared with Mark one of my kind of favorite quotes, and I don't know where it's from, but the saying is, your character is built between the 3, the 2, and the 1. And so when you learn to never give up, when you're competing, you learn to bring that spirit and that fire to your leadership skills, to the problems that you want to solve, and into your career.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dana. Well, great story. And I just wonder, in terms of other panel members, I know, Julie, you've had quite an involvement in sport as well, and I think you learned some valuable lessons.
Yes, and unlike Dana, my sports days sort of ended with high school, but I was very focused on sports in high school. And if you saw me in person, this would make a lot of sense. But basketball was my sport of choice. I'm quite tall, but when I played pretty much since I could walk. I love basketball. I'm decent. I'm certainly not college level good, but when I got to high school and I played my first season, one of the coaches was also the softball coach. And she was like, well, you should try out for softball. And I was kind of apprehensive because I had never played softball my entire life. And I don't know if any of you play softball or know anything about softball, but people who play softball in high school have been playing since they were in T-ball. So somehow this coach convinced me to go try out for the team. And I surprisingly enough made the team. I was the only person on the team who had never played before. So as you can imagine, I was very far behind my teammates and they were not shy in letting me know. But instead of just sitting on the bench in the background, I stayed after with the coach every day and pretty much leveraged my height and my agility and my speed to be able to catch pretty much anything that was hit to me within a reasonable vicinity, and found myself a starting position pretty quickly. And that experience, that was a time where a mentor really pushed me to do something out of my comfort zone, but she knew I had the skills. And I like the word Dana used, grit, because I talk about grit a lot in life. And, I've learned grit through other ways other than sports, but I think it's very prevalent in sports. But, that was a time in my life where I was put in a very uncomfortable position. And instead of shying away from it, I tried to find my strengths in the things that would make me succeed. And, I plowed forward. I never took any kind of a career in softball, but I met a personal goal, and, I found myself a starting spot on the team, which was a huge accomplishment. And, that's something in my career. I've been asked to take on roles that are outside of my comfort zone. And I've been very successful in those roles because I dive in. And, I go back to that experience in sports where if you just put in the work and the grit, as Dana said, if you have the fundamental skills and if you have a mentor who recognizes that in you and pushes you to use them, then you can be successful in things you wouldn't have thought.
Brilliant, thank you. That word kind of leaps out, grit and determination and keep going. I mean, what a fantastic piece of advice, because I think for any exec, you know, there are going to be moments in a career that are going to be challenging, and how you deal with those moments. I think as Dana described, I think there's a piece there about being able, those are career defining moments sometimes. So brilliant advice there. And you mentioned mentor as well, which I think is again something that I want to pick up on. And I was curious around the mentor, the difference that mentor made to you, and your role as well, and that relationship. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think without her, I wouldn't have even thought to try that new thing. And I think. But it was also, the onus was on me to heed her advice and put the work in. She didn't put the work in. She just nudged me in the right direction. And that's what a good mentor does. A good mentor sees your skills and sees the opportunity and helps, because sometimes you don't always, you know, it's hard to see the forest through the trees. And a good mentor is one that will help you do that. But the onus is definitely on you to put the work in. But, you know, I without that mentor, I never would have even tried out for that team. And even in some of the roles I've had in my career, when I think back to every single time I've taken on a new challenge, even leaving PwC and going to the Exelon family, there was always an individual who pushed me or who believed in me and, you know, sort of nudged me in that direction. So to me, it's a very prevalent theme of the successes in my life, is having that mentor, having that support system. But, you know, you have to put your work in as well. So. Yeah.
Definitely, and we're going to dive into mentoring in a moment, but I was really struck when I read about Warren Buffett, and apparently Warren Buffett has a mentor. So, you know, even someone at the top of his game like that, at that level, is still has his counsel that he turns to. So, and it's something that I notice when I work with executives, you know, those that have mentors, and in fact sponsors even, are people that are really help them to progress in their careers. I just wanted to, before we get off the subject of sport, I just wanted to ask Les, because I know, Les, you've obviously played hockey and had some great successes there. I just wonder what your thoughts are around lessons that you've learned from sport and what you've taken into your professional life.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mark. Interestingly enough, Bob Salentic, who's a CBRE of CBRE, the CEO of CBRE, was just in town about 2 weeks ago, and we were having this conversation about, you see a lot of successful business leaders that were former athletes. I'm in a sales position. You see a lot of sales folks that are former athletes, and we're having this debate on what is it about an athlete, what characteristics kind of carry over from their sport that make them a good professional. And you know, it's hard work. It's team first. It's putting in the extra work. But the one thing that really jumped out at him was the ability to lose, the ability to handle a loss. And that really struck me, that, you know, in athletics from a young age, you're in those moments where you lose. And it's the people that get up and keep fighting and keep pushing forward. And you have those moments at every turn in your professional career, where the project you're trying to push forward, or the presentation that you made, and you don't win the business, or you don't get the promotion. And that just needs to motivate you to work even harder to take that next step. So that really struck me. And then I just wanted to mention, I know we're going to get to networking later in the conversation, but one of the biggest impacts sport has had on my career is, you know, you love the game, and I stayed involved with playing men's league hockey and played softball. So going back 15 years, when I was first moved to Philadelphia, didn't have a network, and was just starting to meet people. That's where I developed some of my best relationships, was in sport. And they, to this day, are some of my best friends and best clients. And you know, I urge, you know, any young person to stay involved and give yourself an opportunity to meet people outside of a business setting, when it's really just, you know, letting them understand who you are as a person and be genuine. So I wanted to share that as well, Mark.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Les. Great stories. And interesting, that piece about being able to bounce back from disappointments. Again, it's something I noticed that successful people are able to do, and sometimes people who can't bounce back really struggle. And it really impacts on the way they're seen by senior leadership as well. So that ability, that resilience that I think you can develop through dealing with disappointments, very, very powerful. And we will get onto networking, because it is one of those things that everybody talks about. No, you've got to network. So I'd love to get the panel's advice about what does good networking look like. But I'd really like to dive into the topic of mentoring, because it's such an important theme. And last year we spent a whole webinar looking at mentoring, but I would just love to get a sense of both what it means to be a mentor and the value that people have got from being a mentor, but also in terms of advice for our scholars, what would make them a really great mentee. So Nick, I'd love to turn over to you. I know you've had some great experience at Villanova there, and some a great story there where you talked about someone that you were mentoring, and you got a lot out of the relationship, and so did they. Could you share that with us, please?
Yeah, sure, Mark. I was fortunate enough to be a mentor at the Villanova School of Business, and I was matched up with a junior accounting major a few years ago, and it's been a tremendous experience for me. But getting back to your point about for mentors, what can they do to be a good mentee? I think it's like you have to be first ambitious enough to want to get better, to want to transform yourself. You have to seek out mentors. You have to have the courage to really lean in to the mentoring process, to ask questions, to be vulnerable, to share. And then I think you also have to have humility, right? You have to be eager to learn. You have to be receptive to feedback. You have to surrender to the fact that the mentor might know a little bit more about a certain topic than you do. When we were talking about sports a minute ago, and Mark, I'll forgive you for skipping over my illustrious high school water polo career for professionals like Les and college people.
Sorry.
But I was thinking about Buddy's a mentor to me in golf, right? He's a much better player than me. And, it's probably more of an informal mentorship, but when I play golf with Buddy, I learn stuff because he's a great player and he's a good teacher, but that's because I know he's better at golf than me, right? You have to be humble enough to say, like, hey, if Buddy tells me to do something, he probably knows what he's talking about, right? He probably knows better than me, and I should trust him, and I should go ahead and give it a try, right? So you have to have that humility as well. But my mentee at Villanova, his name was Alex, and I think what made our relationship so successful is that Alex was very proactive. He was courageous. He was ambitious. He was humble about it. He would hold me accountable. If we weren't connecting as often as we should, he would come. He was proactive with coming to me when he had questions or if there was something that he wasn't sure about. And he also showed gratitude, which I really appreciated. If I helped him in some way or gave him some piece of advice, he first of all took that advice and acted on it, but he also then showed gratitude and said thank you. And when a mentee is taking the advice, if they're a good listener, if they're trying the stuff that you're advising, if they're showing gratitude, it feels really rewarding to the mentor, and they're just going to want to lean in more. They're going to want to help more. So I think, to answer your question, Mark, I think in order to be a really good mentee, you've got to really lean into the relationship, and it's one of those things where you're going to get out of it what you put in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, some great advice there. And I wanted to just hand over to Buddy for a moment, because Buddy, I know when we were talking earlier this week, we were talking about the Platt mentorship program, and you had some thoughts around and some guidance for some of the scholars. I wonder if you'd like to share those in terms of getting involved and really participating in that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And Mark, thanks so much for doing this tonight too. I think the level of energy and enthusiasm you bring to this is terrific. And I know our scholars are going to greatly appreciate this as well. I think it's a lot of the things that Nick just talked about, right? It's around bringing that level of energy and enthusiasm. I always think being curious is really important to the learning process when it comes to mentoring relationships, right? And I think that's partly a two-way street as well. And that just helps to grow that relationship. That's really what it's about, right? It's relationship building on that level. It's more than just, hey, I need some advice on this particular topic. You want this to become a relationship, and therefore, you've got to build that rapport. And in doing so, it's all around, as Nick mentioned, it's both parties meeting each other halfway on this, right? That both parties have a role to play in building that relationship, building that rapport, taking a genuine interest in each other, and making that authentic, and recognizing that it's something that will evolve and should evolve, and taking a longer term view on all of that's really important. And I would also suggest that when people, the folks that we are getting to sign up to be mentors in this program have a genuine interest in Platt's mission, have a genuine interest in our scholars. So all of you scholars out there, these are folks that really want to lean in, really want to help. Take advantage of that, right? And take Nick's advice on this. Make the investment. Be curious, be interested. And really think about long and hard what you want to get out of it, and what you're going to put into that relationship. To really maximize what you get out of it. So it's as much as what you bring to the table, and these folks are all there to help you. So don't shy away. In Julie's words, be courageous. Don't be afraid of it. Lean in. The story that you heard, from her in terms of, hey, just the awareness of somebody with a different perspective, who's seen things differently, who is at a different stage in their life, in their career, can be of huge value. And don't limit yourself in this regard either. There's opportunities, to build these types of relationships on multiple levels and with multiple people. And I think most successful people surround themselves with mentors throughout their career. I mean, Mark, you talked about it, that you work with a lot of really, really successful people, and they all still have mentors, and they all still leverage off of those those relationships, regardless of where they are and what stage they are in their life or their career, or how successful they've been. They continue to look for those opportunities and continue to build on those opportunities. So, my strong advice is really lean in, get engaged, take advantage of this. And, these folks can really help make a real difference, especially at the stage where you all are, in terms of your personal life and your your college careers right now. This is really invaluable, and take advantage of it would be my strong advice.
Brilliant. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, and I'd second that in terms of, execs that I've worked with. Many of them they've had mentors throughout their career, and some have more than one. I know execs that have 2 or 3, and one even 4. So it's a great thing to bear in mind. But just I thought of one of the stories that Dana, I'd just love you to share your example of mentoring, how that mentor helped you almost discover your voice, and define your value in a very male world. I was really struck by that story. I wonder if you could share that with us.
Yeah, I'll try to be succinct. So I think Mark mentioned I'm a soil scientist, material scientist, and I work in the world of electrical engineering and running the electric grid. And Julie kind of laid some foundation too. A mentor brings the diversity of thought to the conversation. You don't even know you need a mentor until you have one. Like, that's the hard part. Like, get one and you'll realize the value, right? So I always looked at myself as sort of the black sheep, like I'm different. I could never have this role because I don't have this traditional either education or experience. And she completely reframed her perspective. She saw me in a series of leadership meetings. She saw me leading through a very, very complex set of circumstances, and actually sought out, said, hey, can I help? Do you have a mentor? Can I help lead you through some mentoring sessions? And the perspective she brought was, you may feel like the black sheep in a sea of white sheep, but what you really are is the unique, innovative voice at the table. And when we framed my experiences in that perspective, it was like, you need to go way beyond what you think your traditional career path is. You can play in any space in this organization because you have the leadership skills, you have the desire, you want to put the work in, and you have the capacity to learn and grow. And so the way that my mentor helped reframe and very actively walk through some career development opportunities, I couldn't be more grateful for her to have offered that and made that space for us to have that conversation and bring that diversity thought to the table. And being a woman and having some unique career experiences, those are strength defining pieces of myself that she brought out and really helped me understand how I can craft an extremely rewarding and interesting career path. So again, the power, I think, of mentoring is phenomenal, and you have to take that courageous step and let yourself be open to that kind of thought making as well.
It's such a brilliant point. It's such a great story because, even in the work that I do with people, a big part of it is trying to help people find their voice and that unique value that they bring to any situation and to their team, to their group, to the whole company, and then thinking about how can you articulate that and manifest that. So I think for a lot of young people, it's something that people struggle with in their early days, because you're in a big organization, you don't know how it works, and you're trying to work out how to navigate it all, and suddenly you're in rooms with very senior, very experienced, very knowledgeable people, and there's little you, and you're trying to find your way, And I just think in terms of the panel, if people have, for young executives now, I'm starting out, what advice would you say about that? And I think there's an element of like thinking about your value, but also having that courage to get involved and, put yourself out there a little bit. Anyone want to just jump in on that?
Mark, I can jump in on that. And kind of go off of what Dana said a little bit. I loved where she said that you don't even know the benefit a mentor can provide until you have one, because they've seen things and they've done things that you haven't done yet, right? So they have different visibility than you. The one thing I wanted to add to that was like, there's a saying out there, like learn from mistakes, right? You can learn from mistakes. Well, someone once told me, you learn a lot from mistakes because scar tissue is very painful, and it serves as a really good reminder of a mistake. But they also shared, you don't have to just learn from your mistakes. You can learn from other people's mistakes. And I think that's one of the benefits of mentors is you talk to somebody who's been through it before. You talk to somebody who's dealt with challenges and seen different things than you have. They may have that scar tissue, and they can share with you some mentoring, some coaching to get you through that situation, so you don't have to make the mistake yourself, right? You can learn from their mistake rather than from your own mistake.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Great points. Great point.
Mark, can I make one? Very, very quickly. One of the best mentors I've had in my professional career was a very senior broker. And I think the point that I'd like to make is don't underappreciate what you can bring to the table as a young professional. Thinking about in the commercial real estate space, a lot of the younger professionals are very fluent with technology. And that was something I could bring to the table to show, hey, here's a way that you can approach. You have the experience, but I had the knowledge in this space. Let me show you what we're doing. And we also were very structured with our relationship. We met on a fixed schedule. I always sent an agenda out a few days before our meeting times to be most efficient with our time. And it's been a very rewarding relationship and experience. And I feel like that structure has really had an impact on it.
Brilliant. So structure. Yeah, no, definitely. Brilliant. Thank you, Les. Great points. Anyone else on this topic before we move on?
Mark, I just wanted to make a couple of comments as well. Because I think what's really relevant might tie in with our scholars is that question of, having the courage to step into an environment where it's a little bit daunting and challenging, where there's a lot of senior folks around they may not be accustomed to dealing with. I mean, our scholars are dealing with this every day. They caddy, right? And I think it's important for them to understand and leverage off of those skills that they're learning out there. When they're out there around successful people, right? And they're out there having to provide a service to successful people who are pretty demanding. And think about the skills that you're learning out there and navigating that space. And those are eminently transferable to careers at an early stage. That can be something that you can leverage off of, right, to be more comfortable in that space. Recognize it's never going to be comfortable. We talked about that a little bit. Les touched on it before about, hey, losing never feels good. We learn a lot from that. And we talked about it in terms of, that daunting situation of, geez, do I really have the skills to be good at softball? I never thought about it that way. You're picking up a lot of these innate intangible skills in terms of navigating challenging, fluid situations. Every day you're out there carrying bags on the golf course and dealing with successful folks and having to be relevant, and there's nowhere to hide out there. And think about, what those skills are, and don't be afraid. You're going to be leveraging off those throughout your career. I know that's one of the things I continue to toggle back to, from my career, is my days from caddying as a kid and all the skills that I learned in that space in terms of how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So, think about that and leverage off of that, as you progress through college and taking those first steps on the career ladder.
Brilliant. And I think there's that great phrase you hear now a lot in business, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which seems to have become this kind of maxim for our age. But I think it's quite interesting that, this piece about feeling comfortable, having the courage to push yourself out there, is something that every executive has to grapple with. This is not just junior people, even at higher levels. I've seen it, and it's pretty common. So it's not just, I'm starting out and I don't know how things work. There are a lot of executives who still, as they progress up, will feel a sense of discomfort in certain situations. So yeah, lots of really great points there. And I think the big takeaway is be proactive in terms of getting involved with mentors, and think about some of the great advice points that people have given about, what does it mean to be a great mentee? I want to switch topic now to a piece about goal setting, and to think about how can we focus ourselves so we can think about, achieving great things. And I'd like to turn to Les. And Les, you had a really interesting piece there about the personal mission statement. And I just wanted to ask a little bit around that. And, how does that work for you? How do you go about doing that? What impact has it had? And, and what advice would you have for our scholars in that area?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. I think my approach to this thinking really has evolved over the years, where, initially an early mentor I had was adamant about writing a business plan every year to help kind of refocus. And that's kind of evolved for me, both kind of professionally and personally, to spend time. And it's not always about getting to a mission statement or an end goal that you're happy with. It's really the process of taking that time to think critically about where are you spending your time professionally? Where are you spending your time personally, with your family, with your friends? And kind of really try to prioritize what's important to you, and what are your short-term, near-term, long-term goals, and then taking that step of kind of coming up with a personal mission statement. Every corporation out there has their 1 or 2 line sentence of, here is what we stand for. And I feel like the process, I try to force myself, and Buddy and I have been having a lot of these conversations lately, and I think the last 18 months has forced us all to really self-reflect on what's important. But it's really just coming up with what is important to you? What is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it charitable? Is it professional? Is it personal? And how do you prioritize your time to making sure you're meeting those goals? And that's where I would urge everybody. I'm Stephen Covey and his recent book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's some great reading materials out there. And I think, this has really helped me kind of reset my thinking on being focused on how I'm going to progress my professional career, take the next steps. So it's a great exercise for people to consider.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm curious about the structure of the thinking that goes into that, because sometimes I hear different schools of thought about, some people and a lot of senior people will say, you need to know where you want to be in the next couple of years and then start to work towards that. And then I'll hear other people will say, well, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I tend to just, feel if I do a good job, I will get my just rewards. And I just wonder what the panel think about that in terms of having a very focused and structured approach in terms of career goal setting. Anyone like to jump in on that one?
I think with goals, Mark, the first thing is like you come up with what the goal is. I think you have to look at the why. It's like, why is that goal? So before you first might set a goal, but then you really got to say why. Like, why do I want to set that goal? Why do I want to achieve that? What's the result of that going to be? Because if it's not something that you're passionate about, if it's not something that you're motivated to do, then you're probably not going to, have the grit that Dana talked about to really follow through on it, to have the discipline and the habits and all the stuff that goes into accomplish a goal. I always say some of the problems that people have nowadays is just not being able to dream big enough. You got to dream big enough so that the payoff is big enough to get you through the work, right? It's like, if the goal isn't, if the reward isn't great, then it's like, you're not going to have the motivation and the inspiration to do all the things you need to do to get to that goal. So I certainly think that, when you're selecting a goal, and some people say, hey, it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be realistic, you got to set a timetable, stuff like that. But I think it also has to be something that you're passionate about, and something that the sense of accomplishment and the reward from it is enough to drive you through all the work that it's going to take to get there.
Thank you. I mean, something when I work with people, we talk a lot about vision, like creating a vision for yourself or for your team, and thinking about what impact would I like to have, and really fleshing it out and really painting a picture so that that's a vivid vision that you can actually sense and it excites you. And I think that point about passion is really important. I think obviously it's got to be, within your wheelhouse and in terms of your ability to deliver it. But I think that passion and excitement is something that I think I see again in execs who have that desire to really do something special. So brilliant. Thank you for that. I think a couple of other areas that I'd really love to touch on. I'm aware of time and we've got so many good topics, but I would like to just touch on this area of learning and just get people's thoughts about, okay, we've talked about mentors as being a fantastic place to learn and develop skills. I just wonder what other things and what other advice you might have for our scholars around this piece around keeping learning. Anyone like to jump in on that one? I think, Buddy, you talked about embracing and leaning into change, which I thought was quite an interesting idea, because we go through so much change, don't we? It's cliche now, is that change is this new constant. And I think there's a piece there about, I think I was struck by something you said about, if you actually lean into changes, what the benefits might be. I just wonder if you might share a little bit around that with us.
Yeah, I've found that throughout my career where, if I were to go back and map out where I've really been able to add significant items of substance to my resume or CV, in your terms, Mark, would be in those spaces where I was dealing with a role or a situation where there was a great deal of change going on. And and that was kind of the advice I had gotten earlier in my career around, those are the opportunities where you really learn the most, where you really get stretched the most. You know, and it comes back to the same kind of sporting analogies that we talked about right from the outset, right? Like you learn more when you're in a really tough, challenging game, or as Dana said, getting down to the, you know, the business end of proceedings in the bottom of the ninth or whatever it is. You can come up with all those sporting analogies. But I think the same is said career-wise, right? If you put yourself out there in the situation where, you know, there is a lot of change going on, or that the stakes are high, and accept that and lean into that and approach that in an optimistic and positive fashion, regardless of what the outcome is, you're going to come, your skill set is going to improve and be enhanced. And fundamentally, that's what it's really all about, right? I mean, that, you know, whether you were successful or not successful in that particular incident or that situation is really pretty marginal compared to the whole, you know, what I've learned from that situation, right? I mean, it's, you know, it's analogous back to the Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, right? It was the journey that shaped her, not getting to Oz at the end of the day, right? And it's really putting yourself into challenging situations as often as you can, and recognizing those challenging situations, if you embrace it in the right way and approach it in the right way, are when you're going to do the most in terms of, you know, developing your own skills and really making yourself, you know, better in the context of, you know, being a better leader or a better person or a better, you know, whatever the ambition might be. So, you know, that's kind of what my perspective was, and why I think, you know, the ability to embrace that and lean into challenging situations or fluid situations or situations where it's uncomfortable because we're experiencing change. I mean, that's just natural. It's not a time to shy away. It's really a time to step up and embrace it. And Julie, I'm sure has some observations. She's been there almost every step along the way with me, certainly over the last 10 years. And she could give you good examples of this as well, because I think she's somebody who's consistently demonstrated that, as I've seen, and pleased to see, you know, her own personal progress in that. So I'd love to hear some from her on this subject, because I know she has a lot to bring to the table here. Didn't mean to step on your toes here, Mark. I wasn't trying to.
No, buddy. I think it's because I was actually going to turn to Julie, because she had talked about, you know, that piece about putting yourself in uncomfortable or an unfamiliar position to help you grow. And obviously, I know some of the journey that you guys have been on. So, Julie, it'd be great to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, leaning into change is critical. And, you know, when I talk about uncomfortable situations, Buddy's right on point. You know, the most uncomfortable situations have been when you try to merge cultures, right? And you have to like really embrace yourself with a group of people who do things completely different than what your objective is, and trying to influence that group of people. And I think I've learned so much about leadership and about people just by going through those changes and really embedding myself in the teams that are going through the changes as well, and feeling it with them. And, you know, I think when you're talking about like progression in your career and leadership, change is definitely a time when you can learn the most about leadership qualities and how to be a good leader to a diverse group of people. So.
Brilliant. And Julie, can I ask you just on the piece of kind of career thinking about the, you know, your career journey, I thought something that you highlighted, I thought was really interesting about playing the long game. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that as well, and your thoughts and experience around that.
Yeah, and I think that was in some of the notes I sent you. I think when you're thinking about your career choices, you do want to take opportunities and make yourself uncomfortable, but you also want to be strategic. Like, successful people make very strategic, thoughtful decisions. And while, you know, there's going to be many times in your career where you have to make a decision whether to leave a company or take a new role, or change your complete career path, change colleges even, right? Go back even further. You have to be very strategic when you make a decision like that, and think about we were talking about goals earlier. Think about your long-term goal. It feels really good to be pursued, and it's always fun to get like a carrot put in front of you that's either financial or a new title or more power. But you know, if something looks too good to be true, it might be, or it might take you in a direction that doesn't get you to your personal end goal. I think Les was saying you have to prioritize your time and really think about the whole picture about what you want. So when you think about making career decisions, think about your long-term, and again, your long-term goal looks different. It doesn't mean when you're 21, what do I want to do when I'm 30 years in? But, you know, don't make a decision because something new and shiny is in front of you or you're being pursued. Think about it strategically around where you want to be and where it will take you in the future in your career.
Lovely, thank you. And that segues beautifully into something that Les said about decision making and a question that you asked. Les, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that piece about does it add value? I thought that was an interesting kind of mantra to have around any kind of decision.
And that, by the way, kind of is my personal mission statement at the moment, add value. And I think about that, you know, certainly, again, going back to my profession, right? I'm a vendor, I'm a commercial real estate broker that helps clients navigate the real estate space when it comes to their built environment. Mm-hmm. And the reason my clients engage me is because every step of the way, I'm trying to add value, create value in helping them understand the thought process and you know, negotiate an outcome for them that puts them in a better position to be successful as a company. And I try to take that into my profession or my personal life. How can I be the best father that I can and add value to my family by being a good communicator, by being you know, a good listener, you know, for my friends and for my wife, as a hockey coach with my 6-year-olds out there. Like when I'm thinking about my practice plan and the hour on the ice that I have with them every week, you know, how am I going to add value to help these little guys get better and better? And I think if you approach every decision that you make or every question that you're about to ask, or you know, just, you know, how you engage with somebody, is the actions that I'm taking or the question that I'm asking adding value for them, for yourself? And I feel like that's been a great kind of mental thought process for me as I've kind of progressed through my career.
Brilliant, lovely, and that kind of leads us on to Dana. I wanted to ask you about one of your bosses, and you mentioned the 3 rules. So if you could share those with us, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I'll share the 3 rules. Failure is not an option. There are no rules. And always, always do the right thing. I think when you mentally go through those 3 statements, there's a lot that holds true. And if I can add one more thing, I know we're running short on time. I was trying to think of an interesting analogy for mentors and networks. And this might resonate, might not, but we all use Google Maps or a mapping app to go from point A to point B when we're driving or commuting. And when you think about networks and mentors, they're like the Google Maps of your career, right? They help you navigate your career. So if you're thinking about the importance, we never leave home without our cell phones. And, you know, you should navigate your career with some help. And I think that's maybe a good analogy to walk away from the conversation thinking about.
Oh, that's a brilliant piece. That's a brilliant image. Really, really good. I'm aware of time. I feel like we could talk for another half an hour at least. So many great points have come out tonight. And I just wonder if I could hand things back. But first of all, just to say to the panel, thank you so much for all your work, the pre-work that you've done, and also for this evening. Honestly, so I think some really brilliant advice. So I just, left for me to hand back to Lindsay, and just say, I suppose, are there any questions as well? Is there anything there? Do we have time for questions or not?
We got a couple of questions. Well, thank you, first of all, panelists and Mark. It's awesome stuff, and it ties in so nicely to the mentoring program and what we're doing here. So I really appreciate your input. We have a couple of questions relating to specifics to the mentoring program. To our scholars that asked those, I'll follow up with you individually in the interest of time on some of the technical stuff about the mentoring program. But with one question, if we could just squeeze it in, because I think it's interesting. One of our scholars reached out and said, I'm sorry if you already said this, but how many of the speakers went to school or knew what they were going to do when they were in college? And I'm not so sure I know that for all of the panelists. So I would be curious if we could just squeeze that one in. I would really appreciate it.
I'll answer it very quickly. From me, I didn't know, not completely.
Yeah, I was off in the world of playing softball and learning, and I managed to marry those two things together, but I certainly was not very sense of presence about what I wanted to do when I grew up. I don't think that's something you should worry about. Like a lot of folks said, like follow what you're passionate about. Sometimes that makes all the difference.
Yeah, same here. I thought I knew what I wanted to do, and it definitely got me on the right path. But to Dana's point, I think you come to learn what your unique abilities are, things that you love, things that you're really good at, and things that, it's kind of effortless to learn about. And if you're working in your unique abilities, you're going to be successful. So I think it's kind of an evolution for people.
Brilliant.
I'll just say quickly that I was very fortunate. Again, going back to how important mentors are. We had a student in my class in college. His father was a real estate developer, a very successful real estate developer in New York, and he would come to school probably once a month or so, and we would get pizzas and chips and Coca-Cola, and he would talk us through what his world was like. And that sparked a passion for real estate for me. And so pretty early on in my college career, obviously hockey was a priority at the time, but I always knew I wanted to get in real estate. And it was because this person generously gave his time and helped, expose a lot of students to the world of real estate.
Any other thoughts? Anyone? Julie, did you know what you wanted to do when you were at school?
Not at first. I went into school with very little knowledge of it. I grew up in a household where my mom was an art teacher and my stepfather was a music major. Like there was no concept of business. I knew nothing about that kind of stuff. And when I got to Towson and started taking business courses, I went to Towson University in Maryland. I got into an accounting course and it just clicked in my head. And I talked to an advisor who told me, hey, there's a lot of things you can do with accounting. So I just took it from there, but I figured it out along the way. Certainly didn't know when I went in.
Excellent. Excellent. And Buddy?
Yeah, I'd say it's similar. I figured it out along the way, and I think Dana's absolutely right in the context of at this stage you don't have to know the answer to that. I think following your passions has always been a good guidepost for me, right? The things that if you genuinely enjoy something, you genuinely are passionate about it, you're going to be good at it. And conversely, if you're not passionate, it's going to be very, very hard for you to be successful. And just, keep your mind open at this stage. And, I also liked, the thoughts around, being strategic and tactical in that regard and not jumping at, I think it was Julie's point around being enticed by something that isn't really in line with what you're passionate about, or in line to Les's point, your broader objectives, or that Dana mentioned with regards to the Google Maps, which I really like that analogy, right? It has to fit in and has to make sense. So I don't think there's not a right answer to that question. I think you certainly don't have to know at this stage in your college career, and you're not going to be making bad decisions if you follow, what you're passionate about.
Brilliant. Well, lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This is wonderful. To our scholars, thanks for attending. And please check out the mentoring platform and let us know if you have any questions. We're all here as a resource for you. So thank you to everyone. Have a terrific night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.